Welcome back to episode 5 of Time on the Round. I'm Brendan Patrick, joined by the socially awkward Hayden Dale, who tried to do a couple of introductions, but figured out he couldn't do it. Hit me with, I'm going to do it this time. We waited about 5 minutes and said, nah, mate, can't do it. So, welcome, Hayden. Go ahead. I think you have some announcements for
It's Hat Week. Day. It's Hat Week.
Yeah, it is Hat Week.
It's Hat Week on Arsenal Pass, whatever that means. Brendan
it means it's 6 a.m. We're recording this in the morning, and I'm tired.
Yeah, Brendan's up at 6 a.m. It's 10:15 on a Saturday evening for me, so a little bit different time schedule for us. Doing it a little bit different this week. Brendan is wearing a lady's sun hat to back up, or it's a unisex hat to back it up from the blazer that he was wearing in our deck tech, which has just gone up on our channel as well. Brendan, want to jump to a few things, talk about time of the round today. But firstly, how's the rest of your week been?
Dude, my week was a wash.
Why is that?
Because I've been playing. My week was a wash. I played a new game that came out, Amazon's New World, and I decided. So, I used to play video games when I was younger. I was more of a degenerate. Play a lot of video games. Sometimes
still a degenerate.
Competitively. Yes. Sometimes play them competitively. So I was a bit of a grinder, and I gave that all up. Started living the real life, have a business, do this stuff, and just don't have time for it anymore. So Amazon announced their MMO called New World. It's a 10-day closed beta. And I was like, you know what? I'll put everything off and I'll go hard. I can't put off the Arsenal Pass stuff, but yeah, basically was playing I played 10, 12 hours a day for the past 4 days, and that's all I did. I lived that.
Yeah, no flesh and blood testing, no testing for Road to Nationals. A week out, and Brendan has decided to take 4 days off testing.
Confident. Very confident in my deck, confident in my play skill. I actually played, the first time I played, this was probably the longest time I've ever gone without playing Flesh and Blood for the past, 6 months plus. I hadn't touched cards in 3-4 days, and we filmed the video for CFB, and I remember I was just shuffling him, and I was just ooh, this feels spicy. I'm ready to go. It's it's before a big fight. You don't spar, you get that dog back in you. So I'm ready to go.
Oh yeah, as someone who's never had a fight in their life, I'll say yes and agree. And just start asking you questions. So, time around this week, Brendan, wanted to talk about something that we actually had a question during the Arsenal Pass podcast this week from Dave Marshall out of New Zealand, and he actually provided me with another couple of questions that he was sort of curious. He thought could be great questions for us to discuss, and one of those was around building communities and how to help players sort of on the start of their competitive journey, or just people who are getting into the game and want to take it maybe a little bit more seriously, and what that might look like. And Road to Nationals starting up next week. We've got 8 weeks in total, is it, of Road to Nationals. There's going to be 175 events in total. There's going to be a ton of new players that are playing their first ever Flesh and Blood competitive event, and for some people playing their first ever, not Armory. And actually, I'm almost certain. And we know someone who's going to be in this position, right, Brendan? Someone probably playing their first in-person Flesh and Blood event.
Yeah, that person is Davis Kingsley, who's probably one of the best players in the world. Doesn't really matter what anybody says. He's very, very good. And yeah, he's never played in person. And his first in-person event is going to be Road to Nationals. Needless to say, I think he's put in the preparation to do fine.
I think he'll make a good showing for himself. But yeah. Just wanted to kind of talk about, what you think and what I think it means to, I guess, help build a community, or what maybe people should, or if they feel like they want to do, ways that they might go about that. And I was just thinking about this the other day because, Flesh and Blood has really been in its, infancy, and it started to have some bursts of growth through Crucible and then Monarch, and now with the world starting to open up, obviously we have these calling events. Vegas is going to be a huge marquee event. And it's gone from, I guess what it really started to look like initially was online events, right? We had these armories, we had these skirmish events, and that's where the community really first started, right? It was this big online community, but now we're going to shift more to LGSs, right? It's going to be all about the local game store and the communities that build there, and all of us majority of us are probably going to be going and playing at our local game stores. And what does that look like as new players come in? So, Brendan, do you have any ways that you think you like to welcome new players, or do you have any sort of ethos or thoughts on communities in general?
Yeah, so I think there's kind of two ways to answer this question, right? There's how to build your community in the sense of like your local game store and the people that show up to locals. And I'll talk about that one first, but there's also building your own community, which is building the group of people that are around you that you like to play with that share the same goals as you. I think that's incredibly important to being successful
Mhm.
and improving as a player. But firstly, talking about local communities, it's really rough in the beginning. It's a lot easier nowadays because Flesh and Blood is very popular. Everybody knows about it. It's on CFB. There's videos. You can learn to play, watch high level gameplay. But I remember back in like 2019, my local game store was me, my partner, and then probably like 3 or 4 like 16-year-old kids that would come sometimes. And their biggest limiter was that they couldn't, pay the $15 for sealed every
Mm.
weekend because I
fifteen
mean they're
bucks for
15,
sealed.
right?
That's so cheap.
Yeah,
What?
yeah. And so I remember me and my partner, we would pay for them, and then I also gave them all of my promos because I was winning a lot. And that was all my 2019 Welcome to Wraith promos. But yeah, I mean, like, yeah, back then, I would say back then I really cared a lot more about trying to grow the community because I knew that if I didn't do something, it wouldn't be there. Nowadays, the game is just kind of on its own trajectory and it's got its own following, and it's going to grow no matter if I participate or not. Um, for me, I'm not huge into going to local events anymore, mostly because just where I'm situated, it's like it's good and bad. Like a lot of people be envious if I say, uh, I have like 3 stores an hour away from me, or like 45 minutes hour away. But there's like none of them are close, right? For me, that's yeah, it's every time it's like a 5 hour ordeal, and it's the traffic into Dallas. Just not a fan. So I'll go for like specific nights like draft and things like that. But I've stopped kind of the local grind. But I think
Mm.
it's really important if you're just starting to go there, show up and be present, because the first few events or the first couple months where there is that core group of players is what makes it successful or unsuccessful. So there has to be a consistent group that goes there kind of every weekend, and grows the scene. After that, you will develop like a stable base. People will hear about it, and then it will just become its own thing.
Yeah.
What about you,
That's
Hayden?
yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I think that's something that when Welcome to Wraith first came about and then into Arcane Rising, we had this experience, I guess probably similarly, that I frequented a few game stores in the Sydney area where I live. Was trying to go every week, and I knew it wasn't. Some weeks I'd go and the events wouldn't fire, and that sucked. But I kind of had this belief that I thought this game was going to grow, so I wanted to keep going back and introducing the game to people. And every time that players or people came along and played the game, they generally came back. So there was a bit of an issue with like product shortages for a while, especially during like Arcane Rising. But post that, I think we've seen communities around the world grow, and I know that was what happened for my local game store. I felt that if I went every week for a period of time, I knew that it wouldn't be forever. I wouldn't have to keep doing this, but I felt like not obligated, but I actually wanted to, and I felt that it was going to actively help to set up a community in some of these stores. And after that, some of these stores I no longer go and play at because they're just too far away, or I can't because of work or other commitments, but I'll go once in a while. And these communities are thriving, and there's a bunch of other players in my area that were part of this with me. There's probably a core group of like 6 to 8 of us that were just going around events and playing. And that, to be honest, is one of the best ways. And I know I've spoken to some players in the US and in North America who are currently going through the same thing in their areas, especially where they're maybe in smaller communities or smaller areas outside of the larger CBD areas where they might have 1 or 2 game stores, and for them, Flesh and Blood is completely new. It could be like Magic dominated, or it could be like a traditional board game store, or they might be Pokemon focused, whatever. Where Flesh and Blood is starting to come up, and these guys are and girls, some of them are going hour and a half, 2 hours out of their way to go to these armory nights to help grow the community. They're spending most of the time just teaching players, but I know that they're getting sort of joy out of it as well. And not everyone has to do that. Not everyone has to pay entry for some kids to play and to learn and have a good time. But I think everyone who is interested and invested in this game's success and wants to be around it can do something. And it doesn't need to be huge. It can be just as small as helping out a player who rocks up one day just to learn the basics of the game. That could be all you ever do to help your local community. But I think, if if you do, care about the game, I think I would encourage people just to keep an eye on and see what they could do to help people as they come into this game. And heading into Road to Nationals, which I know you're going to speak about, like competitive communities and growing your community right in a minute. But when you go to these events this weekend, next weekend, and following weekends, I think just think about all these players who are coming in for their first time, and how you can make that experience good for them, how you might expect that experience to have been for yourself when you first went to a Road to Nationals or equivalent event.
Yep. I think it was kind of like back in Logan Wraith. A lot of us, I know what motivated me to do it is that I wanted the game to be successful, and nowadays the game feels like it is successful. So that's why I feel like I've had to, been able to take my kind of foot off the gas pedal there. I think there's another part to it, which is sort of like the ethos of how you play the game and how you treat other players when you're at armories, which is really, really important. The game is new, it's young, and like a lot of the people that will become good at the game and will be a valuable resource to you are going to suck at one time, because you sucked at one time. Everyone is bad at one time. So I think it's really important to take, when you're, especially in an armory, to take a very, very casual approach. Like I let everybody take everything back. If they have like they sit down with like their iron rod helm or something, like, oh yeah, I'm waiting on my skull cap. I'm like, it's a skull cap. Like we pretend like it's a skull cap, because I just try to make the experience as casual and as beneficial for them as possible. Because the truth is like if I've played, every day for a year and then been playing for like 2 years now, and it's their first day sitting down, it's more their experience is way more important than mine. I kind of I'll focus on my gameplay in other areas. So yeah, I mean, through when I play games, I definitely at like kind of an armory level do play very casually and do try to help people and not give any bad experiences. Which is like, I mean, the rules of Flesh and Blood can be quite convoluted, so
Yeah,
always let the take backsies, all that good stuff. Unless I know my opponent's a dingus, and then I'll hit him with a, you don't want to win that way. What do you mean?
trying to play you. It's you should, I guess, it's an armory is an armory, right? If you're going to armories, you should expect it to be more of a casual affair. It's that sort of lower tier of entry level play to organized play for Flesh and Blood. It's not a Road to Nationals. It's not a calling. Majority of the players there probably are never going to go to a Worlds or a Pro Tour. They might go to a calling in their time maybe, but for the majority of players, it's a weekly time to have a break. Maybe a lot of them are learning a new game. It's a new hobby for them. So I think just treat it how how you'd approach that kind of environment. I think it's good to be part of that environment. And for me personally, I don't go to as many armories as I used to, because the community just builds itself now, and that's not necessarily the experience that I'm going for in Flesh and Blood. For me, it's more now probably around the competitive side of the game. So it just becomes time spent, right? Like, where am I investing my time? Which I know you probably feel in a similar way as well.
Well, yes. Now the time is evaporating since like Arsenal Pass and then testing for it to nationals and callings. It's like
New
all
world.
of those. Yeah, exactly. Like all of those time slots that used to be locals are now filled up with content creation or very, very targeted testing for upcoming events. But coming off of that, I do want to talk about the other side of it, which is building your community, which they don't need to be mutually exclusive. Your local community can be your community, and that can be totally fine. But if you do want to achieve a certain goal in this game, or I think this rule is actually applicable to kind of any skill, any trade, anything you're passionate about, and you're trying to, kind of achieve whatever your goal is. It's important to surround yourself with people who have similar mindsets and similar aspirations. And that was one thing that I worked on really, really hard for the past year. And I think that I was incredibly successful with. And if I, if I kind of do anything in this game, it will be off the back of that, 100%. Like I did the legwork, reached out to, the Hayden Dales, the Sasha Markovics, the Dante Delficos. Like I put myself out there and, gave myself the opportunity to kind of cultivate these relationships. And then once I did, I utilized those to create, testing groups, group of people, all these kind of things where I can play games with people that have similar goals as me, have similar play skills as me, and I can extract a lot of value for the time I put in. And I think that was probably the most beneficial thing I invested in terms of like flesh and blood, kind of social economics, and wherever I end up right now. So I I don't know
Yeah.
how you feel about that, but for me, uh, if I achieve any success in this game, it is absolutely off the back of all the people that I've surrounded myself with and been able to play games with, and take my learning of flesh and blood to the next level with.
Yeah. I think it's one of my favorite things about this game is that you can find like-minded people who have similar, I guess, ideas or what they want to get out of their time spent playing Fab, right? For a lot of people, that's going to be going to their local armory every Wednesday, wanting to play against the best players in their city, and winning. Some people might just be participating. Other people, it might be a step above that, where it's testing for these events, making a nationals, top 8 a nationals, getting to a pro tour, top 8 a calling. Like these could be all the aspirations for other people. So you can just go and find, like you said, right, like-minded people, and that's how part of the way that we connected, right, as well, was that we had a pretty similar mindset on what we wanted to do in this game, as you did before with Sasha, as you say with Dante as well. So there's going to be like-minded people out there. I think one of my favorite things was I got 3 of my very good friends from back home into the game finally, who are long-time Magic players who are now on that journey as well. It's not just other people that you maybe don't know; it can be people that you know as well, and you bring into communities and sort of ingratiate into communities. So yeah, I think it's such a cool thing that you can do. And the other thing I want to say is you can also, like you said, build up the community around you. Like if you have some players in your local area that have aspirations to be competitive, the way that they're going to get better is playing against the best player, right? And if you're one of the best players in your community, a service that you can actually do for your community as well, like your local LGS, is actually going to those skirmish events, going to those armor events if it makes sense for you, and battling it out, right? And you'll see these players getting better. I've definitely seen that in my area to the extent that we have a lot of very good players. And that reminds me of in Magic, I know there was like multiple stores in North America that were like famed for their level of play. Like people were, the F&Ms were like super competitive because they had some of the best players in the world going to these like Friday Night Magics and playing every week. And they had new players coming in who were like wanting to be, had aspirations to be competitive players who'd get on the Pro Tour. And they were actually like coming up through these local events because they were just week in, week out playing against the best, as we saw in a similar way with like the online skirmish season, right?
Yeah, very nostalgic take there.
Always.
Yeah, because that's like the
face-to-face games,
Well, it kind of went away with streaming and Magic, like as an esport, right? But yeah, that was absolutely a thing back in the day. It was like you would have certain stores where there were, or certain areas where there'd be clusters of very, very good players. And like geographically, it just was disproportionate, right? It would be like this area in Northern California has like some of the best legacy players, or like
the East Coast, like they drafted.
Yeah, this like little East Coast town that has like all the best limited players. So it's really interesting because Flesh and Blood will never be, kind of online or online sport. I know we have online armories, but that's not the same thing, right? This is probably going to be a thing that we will experience as well once COVID is kind of fully, fully gone, or whatever you want to call it.
You kind of already see it though, right? Like you see localized metas, and even though, to be honest, like the game now is probably as most online as it's ever going to be, I would think. That's kind of my thought process right now. And you already see localized metas. You see regions who are, you've got
like Hong Kong.
Well, you've got New Zealand where you've got like certain players that seem to be better on certain decks, or you've got the North American Iris, whatever it might be. Like you're already starting to see this, and once online sort of goes back to that more casual side and the real competitive stuff gets played out at callings, at nationals, at PTs, whatever, I think you'll see that even more.
Yeah, it's so funny you say that, because like the identity is most distinct in the Hong Kong players, because they put some crap in their decks that, like, God, I wouldn't do it on my deathbed. Like, it's just crazy. But it works for them because it works in their meta and it works for their playstyle. And I'm not even saying it's wrong. I'm not saying it's wrong. Like they play it well.
Yeah.
But it's just it's hilarious because it's a total meta call, and it's a playstyle call from their playstyle has evolved from adapting to their own meta, and these cards make sense in those decks because that's just how they play. And it's just hilarious because we would never put these cards in our deck because we don't play against the same stuff over here. Specifically their Kano decks have a very discernible identity, which is hilarious because like as soon as you play someone who's net decked it or someone who's from Hong Kong who plays Kano, I mean, you know immediately, like, okay, it's a Hong Kong Kano deck. Like, I know exactly what's in this deck. It's targeted to beat this. It's X better, this much better in the mirror. Like, it's super interesting. And I guess that comes from, I get that sentiment because I played a lot of Kano and Blitz. So there was very much this dichotomy between the sort of rest of the world Kano decks and then the Hong Kong Kano decks. And the Hong Kong Kano decks were actually, significantly stronger in the mirror, which was what was funny. Actually, there was a trade-off, right? So they ran like Skullcap, Fate Foreseen, Red, and Nourishing Emptiness, and then like some other stuff. So they didn't have the lens. They could whiff off the top and just auto lose the game, but they could also Nourishing Emptiness you. And like, yeah, I mean, it was just hilarious. It was weird kind of duking it out with those Kano decks. Unfortunately, the Kano mirror is not super skilled, bit draw dependent. But we did have these two very, very distinct decks kind of go at it throughout that skirmish season. And that's true. It's like it's funny because there's like a region that wasn't really on the map of Flesh and Blood before season 2, and then just kind of exploded onto the scene through online skirmishes, won a lot, 90-day XP, all that good stuff. And now those players have a very, very distinct identity in their decks. And a lot of them is like, of course, they're very well known as well, like Kelvin Law, all those guys. So it's really interesting to see. And I think that's like a perfect example of what you said. Like it could be, like this little town in New Jersey or something has a bunch of limited players, but like we have this, this country in Asia that just is pumping out like these ridiculous Flesh and Blood grinders that are getting way better, way faster than anyone else.
Yeah, I guess you've kind of you've seen a bit of that with, I know people were like taking a photo at like an Auckland game store and they're like, oh, here's the top 5 players in the world sitting around a draft table, but obviously that's very early on in the game stage, but I'm sure we'll see that again, whether it be at a US store or it be at a store in Hong Kong or it be a store in Singapore. And we did see a bit of that like at the first Nationals. So with the Nationals, so we had New Zealand Nationals and we also had, I want to say it was the Taiwan Nationals. I have to go back to I'm pretty sure it wasn't.
There was a Taiwan Nationals.
Yeah, Taiwan Nationals. Yeah. So, and the Taiwan meta was very different to what we saw in the New Zealand meta, to the extent that I think one dash deck maybe made top 8 and was really dominated by
bunch of ninjas and warriors, eh?
Yeah, ninjas and warrior. It was just all Katsu and Dorinthia. And, we saw that already. So I actually think it's something that's super cool about this game. And it's going to be so fun when you travel to a calling event or a pro tour that's a bit more localized and you show up and you're like, yeah, I know this is the meta, like this is what we've been testing, this is what our group found to be the best deck, and then you show up and then these other players are like, yeah, we were like one step ahead of that, or we didn't even get to that deck because our meta is so different, so we've got this other deck, and it's like you just get this massive like almost like melting pot of things.
Yeah, and cool. It's a really interesting concept because like I'm sure back in the day of Magic that was really common, right? Like you show up and like this region would bring something, but nowadays in this like age of just information, right? Like there's just so much information, like everybody puts everything out, like everybody's a content creator, right? Like if they, I don't know, there's everybody puts up this new deck, this deck, that deck, and it feels like, kind of we're all playing the same stuff nowadays to an extent, especially because like Flesh and Blood publishes our deck list as well. So our deck list is, they get put on display very frequently. So it doesn't really feel like this happens. Obviously, I think when we go to Vegas, like if we're going to see this or get this kind of feeling with like different regions bringing like drastically different takes on decks, it's going to be there. But yeah, it's super interesting that even in like 2021, this can still happen. And I think that's quite a testament that it can happen at all. Because like for now versus like 5-10 years ago, the amount of crap that's on YouTube or like Channel Fireball, like Strategy, or even just in Discord, right? Like now we have Discord, this like massive,
it's all on 24/7.
Massive social exchange of information. It seems like it would be very hard for there to be these kind of like secret, like underground, like not even like a small test group, but like this region has this like kind of deck identity that they discovered and nobody really figured about. So
yeah, because you assume that someone's going to like take a photo or start talking about it. Like people are connected, right? It's very weird that you'd have like 20 or 30 people who are just isolated, but it sounds like with Hong Kong, maybe that's what's happened, but not really anywhere else so far. So we'll see.
Yeah.
All right, Brennan. Communities. I think there's so much more for this game, and it's really exciting to see that more and more areas around the world, local game stores are starting up with Flesh and Blood, and players who've been playing this game for 3, 6, 9, 12 months, a year, 2 years now are really helping to build those communities. We're a week away from the first Road to Nationals. When this goes live, I think we'll be 5-6 days out. So thought it'd be cool to maybe talk about our predictions for the first Road to Nationals, what we're expecting to see, decks we think are going to do well, what we think might be a bit of a surprise, and maybe things we don't expect to see. So I thought maybe I could just kick it off, give you a quick few minutes to have a think while I sort of spew my predictions, and then you can also bounce off mine as well if you want to say anything like I'm stupid or I don't know, I'm wrong,
or you just spoiled all the secret information.
No, I didn't actually check this with Brendan, but I have been careful not to say. I'm kidding. But obviously, Brendan, you're going to be going to a Road to Nationals this weekend. I think a Sunday is your first one. Is that right?
Begrudgingly, it's a nice scenic drive to Houston, Texas.
Dude, so. you can't complain. I'm probably not going to get to play any Road to Nationals at this point, unfortunately. So I'm going to be living vicariously through you, so you can't complain about them.
I'm complaining.
No, I'm not going to let you. I'm not going to let you do it. It's Hat Week. We don't complain on Hat Week, all right? So, just a couple of predictions that I have, I think, for what I think we will see through the first week. I tried to have a look to see exactly how many. I couldn't be able to counting on the Flesh and Blood page. It looks like if I just did quick math, 175, I think there's 8 weeks. So presumably we're going to see 20 something in the first week. Bit of quick math. I'm thinking probably we're going to see Chain show up in force this first weekend. It's been popular through all the class constructed events we've seen so far. I don't think it's going to go anywhere. People have learned to play the deck. It's a fairly easy deck to play. I would say like 70-80%. I think it's probably an easy choice for people to take. And people have had lists locked in from pretty early on. I think it'll show up pretty well into top 8. I think it'll have an okay conversion rate. But I think we're going to see some similar results to what we've seen so far, where we're going to see control decks sort of pip a lot of these decks into semifinals, finals. I know there was the charity event. We didn't see a Chain even make it into the top 2. The CC Gauntlet that was on the other week was won by a Katsu control deck. I think it was basically Winton's deck from the PTI. PTI obviously also won by
basically Winton's deck. It was
exactly the same. Yeah, so we've seen that list now win to obviously a big PTI event, or a big event that we've had for Classic so far, and an online event where there was players from around the world playing. So that's probably what I'm expecting us to see. I think we'll see a pretty similar meta, to be honest, to that first ProQuest that was in Auckland. So that was like Chain, Prism, and then Warrior and Ninja. I think the exception to that is that we're going to see a bit more Guardian than we did there. People seem to be on a bit of a Bravo train lately, so I expect that Bravo takes a share of Prism's sort of meta, I guess, going into this, and we see Chain, Guardian, Prism, Warriors, and Ninja.
Katsu.
Yeah. Katsu and
I think that Chain is the most liable to lose all the time in Road to Nationals. It's just a bad. So don't take what I say too seriously, because I'm not going to tell you guys anything special here. But statistically, and just the Chain deck at its core competency is kind of a bad deck. Like, if you play the mirror, it's, in my opinion, and this is actually my 100% opinion, the mirror is no skill. 100% coin flip. The better player does not win. I mean, you can mess it up if you don't know what you're doing. But other than that, like, you don't have to play tight. It lasts like 3-4 turns. It's very draw dependent. Miserable. So if you think that there's going to be a lot of Chain, unless you're very confident on the deck, you have some very consistent tech, which, like, how are you going to have consistent tech if it's a 3 to 4 turn game? Then you're going to be playing a lot of coin flips. And if you're a high skilled player, that's not attractive at all. Then again, like, if we look at these events, we look at the charity event. The charity event was won by Katsu Aggro. We look at all the other events outside of that. Chain is just kind of losing the control very consistently. So if you're playing Chain and you can't beat control, don't bring that deck. It's a terrible deck to bring. You're going to lose. And most of the people you play are going to be playing control. And that's a fact. I expect there to be massive amounts of control. I think that people that bring Chain will probably switch off of it pretty quick, because if I brought Chain, I would expect over 50% of my matches to be against people who are actively not going to play the game and are just going to block with every card in their hand. if you don't know how to beat that strategy, you're gonna lose Road to Nationals if you bring Chain. There's no way you don't accidentally beat it. It's I don't know. And there's like new tech and stuff. So Chain is a weird deck. I am not a fan of the deck. That doesn't mean I won't play it. But there's a lot of other stuff in this meta too. Like there's Prism. Like Prism is just it's a weird deck, and I think it can beat almost anything. And it has a lot of high roll potential. That being said, it struggles versus Guardian. Some people think that like that matchup is
So
I don't know.
weird.
I hear a lot.
Yeah.
I hear a lot of crazy stuff, man. I hear a lot of crazy stuff, and I take it all with a grain of salt because like half of it's like Sleep Dart Azalea crap. But I hear this stuff about like Prism having like an easy matchup in a Bravo. Like it doesn't. It doesn't at all. I've literally played both Iris and Luminaris. Like it doesn't have an easy matchup in the Bravo whatsoever. It's actually one of its hardest matchups. Then you have Brute, which could show up because Brute is sort of like a fan favorite pet deck, and Brute is decently positioned in the meta. Maybe not week one because Chain is around and other aggro decks as well. Make it a bit hard, but yeah, it's weird. I think that there's a lot of hype around Chain, but you can't. I think that if you were newer or if you had less practice than some other players, probably the worst deck that you could pick up to try to win a Road to Nationals would be Chain. Because if you don't know what you're doing, you lose to control 100% of the time. And the mirror is just garbage. Like, it's so bad. Like, it's such a bad mirror. So, I don't know. We're in a weird scenario. I know that you think that, like, you can win the mirror.
No. I wasn't going to say that. I do think there's some aspects of skill shot, but I do agree that it's not a very fun game, and it's not always the best. It's not less so than other mirror matches in this game. It's less the best player that wins the matchup because it's just a higher element of variance. But I would say that I don't think it's necessarily a bad deck to take if this is you're going in reasonably cold because you just have to top 4. So
you just have to dodge all the The thing is, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but the thing is, it's like the Bravos, the mech controls, and the costume controls, they have to employ 0 brain cells, 0 brain, like literally nothing. They literally don't have to do anything. It could be your your little brother who's 5 years old on the deck. He literally just takes his 4 cards, goes meh, and that's it, and then will beat you. And if you don't know how to beat that, you're done, and that's going to be a lot of your matches. So I just don't see, if you are not super confident against that strategy, you're going to face it so much, and it's so annoying. Like, I mean, it seems like it's a bad experience waiting to happen if you're not ultra prepared.
Yeah, I was going to say, to be clear, to clarify, Brennan, you're not saying that you can't beat it. You're just saying that if you're not prepared, you're going to have a bad day.
I'm not answering that question, but yes, if you're
not prepared for it, you have a bad day.
Yeah, you're going to have a bad day. I'm not going to talk about the other part.
Sure. All right. I'll move on. I don't expect we'll see much innovation heading into this weekend for the first week of Road to Nationals. Not to say that we won't through the season. I think we'll probably see some decks that are maybe less frequently played start to pick up as we go through the season. It's a lot of events, right? So we are going to see rogue decks. We're going to see some different things make top 8. We're going to see regional variances as well. But I think for the first week,
decks as well.
What's that? Sorry.
Yeah, budget limitations on decks,
sure,
which will lead people to play. I mean, certain people will only be able to play it's a massive luxury if you can play multiple heroes. I think in this game, like the vast majority of the population only plays one, which means that they play it every single meta. So, like Hayden said, there's going to be a lot of, I don't know. Let's think, like, what is like one of the worst? What is one of the least popular decks? Like, it probably wouldn't be this one. Yeah, like Viscerai, or like, assume Levia was printed at Welcome the Wraith. Like, Levia is almost universally not played, but if it was printed like Welcome the Wraith and everybody had the cards, like, you would still see Levias like every time you show up. Like, you're still going to see Rhinos. You will definitely see Coxus.
I think that's going to be 80% of, to be honest, I think that's going to be like 70 to 80% of the Druntia players. It's going to be just traditional Druntia players. The fanboys.
The Rentia players are something else.
I just don't. I think I think a lot of people are going to play it safe first week. Play a deck that they've known. There might be some things that are starting to come around the fringes that people are starting to understand about this meta and ways to attack it. But we're a week out now. People are going to have time to test that. Like you said, they're going to know these matchups and how to win them. So I think that's a week 2, week 3, week 4 thing that we start to see a bit more innovation. I think we're going to see a lot of rounds go to time in this event, unfortunately, for the first week or two. Obviously, a lot of newer players coming in, but also, like you talked about already, there's going to be control decks at this event. People are probably going to sit on control to at least start the Road to Nationals season.
Very important too. Something we should probably touch on for if you're a listener of this. That's going to happen. You've got new players on control decks. Control decks are very easily net decked right now. The strategy is also extremely easy to employ versus Shane. Don't be afraid to speed up your opponent because that is not fun. Like control players that are blocking with their whole entire hand and taking 5 minutes per turn. Like it is a Road to National events. I never ask people to play faster at armories because timeout draw, whatever, doesn't matter. But at this, my strategy for slow players is that as soon as it starts to get slow, I just mention the game is slow and they'll probably just be up to go. And then I will literally just talk down the time intervals. We hit 30 minutes left. We hit 20 minutes left, 15, 10, 5, all that. And that generally gets people to speed up unless they're intentionally trying to time you out, which literally hasn't happened to me yet in 2 years.
No.
But who knows? Maybe it will eventually. But that being said, don't be like socially afraid to ask a player to speed up. There is a lot of social pressure to, I guess, like it's weird if you're not used to TCGs, which I wasn't. Flesh and Blood is kind of my first trading card game. It feels very, very rude and weird to ask someone to speed up because it's like I don't know, it's like a weird dynamic.
It is, yeah.
That's something you have to get over if you want to be, I don't know, successful. Because there will be players that are not intentionally slow playing you, but just play slow because that's who they are, and they don't realize how slow they play. And as like a better player that wants to win, I'm not saying they're bad players, but if like you do, like actively not wanting to time out, you have to be in kind of the mind frame to be cognizant of the clock and of the time. And if your opponent is not someone who can actively do that while playing the game, you need to be verbally reminding them this is the time where like at this pace we will not finish, like all this kind of stuff. And you don't have to be aggressive. Like the last thing you want to do is be an ass about it.
Exactly.
You can be polite about it, but don't be afraid to do it because you shouldn't be an ass about it, but definitely don't be afraid to do it because it is not taboo in TCGs. If you're new, it is not taboo at all. Some people may I don't know. I've never had anybody respond negatively to
it's
I also
both
have
players.
a way of doing it that's very nice.
Yeah, but it's both players' responsibility to play in a timely fashion. Like that is the rules of the game. And if one half the players aren't keeping that up, it's actually your responsibility to remind the opponent that they need to make plays in a timely fashion. If you don't feel super comfortable about it, maybe it's your first event and you think that your opponent is playing slow, just call a judge. Just call a judge. And, if you feel comfortable, I would say mention it to your opponent first. Like as Brendan said, it's very easy just to say, if we're going to finish this game and just speed up a little bit, if they're tanking on a turn, it's taking 2-3 minutes, you can just politely say to them, I think you need to make a play here. And if, it goes 30, 45 seconds more and they don't, you just put your hand up, call a judge, and just say, I'm just calling a judge. I just don't feel comfortable about the speed of this game. You don't even have to explain yourself if you don't want to, but you can. And it is a little bit awkward, or it can be a little bit awkward, but, if you're there at a competitive event to play a competitive game and you want your games to finish in time, as everyone should, it just kind of needs to be done. So, yeah, judges are going to be all good about it. They'll come over. You can obviously just say, just feel like my opponent's not playing in a timely fashion. And if someone said that to me, someone called a judge and they said that I felt I wasn't playing in a timely fashion, I would just say, oh, okay, all right, no worries. I would let the judge decide for themselves if they think that's the case. If I didn't believe that if I actually thought, I am playing in a timely fashion, not sure why my opponent's called a judge. But a lot of people will probably realize and go, yeah, I have taken like 2-3 minutes to do this. And as Brendan said, you can tell them that time it's taken. You can see the clock.
Yeah, for me, it would be a little bit weird if someone called the judge without asking me first. Because I don't know, for that's more of a personal thing. But I would be really confused if my opponent just called.
Yeah. I think it's also it's
like they would get a different version going forward because if they want to play by those rules, then we would play by the rules of the game, and there would be no take backsies.
I think it's polite to let your opponent know that you think that they're playing slowly. They need to speed up. They need to pick up the pace of the game, and if they kind of don't respond or it's not happening, then yeah, of course, call a judge. Anyway. The last prediction I have for you, Brendan, is that we've seen Azalea take a couple of top 8s this weekend.
Yes.
And we've seen Azalea get an invite to Nationals. I think it's going to happen this weekend.
Sure. don't let me forget because we got to talk about this after. The new new Ranger was officially confirmed by James White in like an interview. I didn't listen to it. Dante told me he timestamped it, but I didn't click it. But apparently it's done, so we'll talk about that after. So Azalea in top 8. Yeah, potentially. It's positioned well versus Shane, which could be a large portion of the meta. It's matchups into control. I'm not too sure about, so we will have to see. But yeah, I mean, totally. Like in 175 events, can Azalea top 4?
No, I'm calling it this weekend. I'm calling it this weekend. And the 15 to 20 events happening this weekend. We're going to see an Azalea top 4. Or top 8.
Maybe. Yeah, I mean, Azalea is going to be there no matter what. Azalea is... Is it more pet deck than Dorinthia? Maybe. I don't know. It's either Dorinthia
I think the proportion of people who play it pet deck it more.
Yeah.
People play warrior as they feel. That's the one thing with some of the heroes that are less represented is that a lot of I'd say like the top level of players, whether it be like the top 15, 20%, a lot of them just aren't touching these decks. So their representation tends to come from players who are a bit less experienced, and then they already have a bit of maybe an uphill battle to win, to get into this top.
We talked about this in the CFB video we did recently, but I know we dollar on Azalea a lot, but Azalea's better positioned in this meta than it has ever been, for sure. Yeah. I think, right? It's better than it was in Crucible, better than Arcane. I think this is the best position. I mean,
targeting possibly. Chain, right? Yeah, I'd have to. I think it's a different conversation. Okay, cool. All right, so Road to Nationals this weekend kicks off. We're probably going to see some chains. We're going to see some control decks. We're going to maybe see an Azalea sneak in there. We'll see some Dorinthias, no doubt. Probably some Boltons. Should be good.
Bolton Saber.
Anything else you want to talk about, Brendan?
Yeah, there's a new... Well, I don't know how much we can talk about, but there is a new Ranger confirmed, so... If you haven't heard about it, it's on the Fabled Collections, I think is the...
Fabled Hunters.
Yeah. Fabled Hunters. Fabled Collections is a store. Fabled Hunters, they had an interview part 2 with James White where he did confirm it, I believe. So, yeah, get excited. I know everybody wants a new Ranger here. I'm really interested to see how it turns out because my issues with Ranger are in the Ranger cards, not in the Azalea hero itself. Although Azalea hero, we could get a better heal ability potentially. So I'm super interested. I really want to be able to utilize like traps and poison darts and all these other fun things that like Azalea just had so much cool design. We just haven't seen it be effective in practice yet. So would really like to see a cool new Ranger.
All right, Brendan, to round out this time in the round. It's not quite time in the round. We've got a few minutes left in the round, Brendan, to close it out. Little question for you here, Brendan. I told him before we started that I was just going to throw a little question at the end, a little fun fact for everyone.
I don't know what this is. Yeah.
What's your favorite movie, Brendan?
Well, it's like asking your favorite book. That's so hard.
It is, but it's like asking your favorite book, but instead of asking about the favorite book, you ask about a favorite movie. So it's
sure. I'll answer my favorite movie if you answer your favorite book after.
Sure, done.
So, God, I don't know how to answer without 2. Probably my favorite most enjoyable movie was probably Inception. Like I watched that a bunch of times. I thought it was a really good movie.
Nolan, bro.
Yeah, I really like psychological thrillers. Like that's my favorite type of movie, and I think that it's pretty hard to get right. So there's not too many out there that are a good watch. So I thought that was an incredible movie. Also love the concept of dreams, and of course it was beautifully directed. And then I have to do a caveat because everybody does this with their favorite movie. My kind of second favorite one has got to be Requiem for a Dream in terms of impact. Like that movie will F you up, but like that is a really, really powerful movie. And I know when people say like powerful movie, it's usually some like kumbaya crap, but like Requiem for a Dream is the absolute opposite. And it's almost like a scare you straight kind of one. It's really, really good.
It's a very good movie. Yeah. Jared Leto getting his start.
Yeah. Oh God, the movie's messed up. All right. Favorite book, go.
All right. I quite like fantasy books. That's probably the genre I read the most of. That and biographies, autobiographies. So a bit of a difference. I like read books for educational purposes for work and things like that, like business and negotiation books. But then I also like to read fantasy books. And my favorite series, although it's not a finished series, and favorite book is the King Killer Chronicles and The Name of the Wind. That's my favorite book by Patrick Rothfuss.
Name of the Wind is good.
Yeah.
Name of the Wind is real good.
So
That will never be finished, though. That guy does.
I know.
Not
I've
run
been
out
waiting
the
like
bush.
10 years. It's like the Game of Thrones conundrum, right? Will we ever
Calling
get
the
it?
name of the wind.
All right, Brennan. I hear a ding on the clock.
It's your turn, bro. You're the host, remember?
Of course. Sorry. That's time of the round.
Active player.
Play.
Turn 0. One additional turn. See you next time.
See you next time.